Episode 2, action.
Action. Welcome back to episode 2. We are so excited to be back with some awesome topics for this episode. This episode, we're going to be discussing following your passion. We're going to be discussing taking risks, following what ignites and aligns with your soul, your comfort zone, and also stepping into fear.
Exactly. We're so excited about this topic. We thought it would be really important, just because Kirsty and I have both had pretty extensive and decorated resumes. So at times we've both had discussions about how, creative we've been in the past and things that have led us to where we are today. And we do think that it is very easy to look back on things that you've done and not necessarily see them as useful pieces of the puzzle to where you are now. But we're here to talk about that today and just shine a light on this topic for everyone, on how to follow your passion, how to sort of have a bit of a reflection on all the things that you've done in the past and whether you feel like they might have been useful to you or not, highlighting to you that they potentially have been. And we also thought it's a bit of a fun topic too, because we've both had some pretty exciting, fun things that we've done in the past. It just shows you guys a little bit more about who we are, where we've come from. So first topic that we're going to really dive deep into is really taking risks and following your dreams and following what ignites your soul. And to get us to that, we wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about what we've done in the past with our previous job experiences. So Kirsty, why don't you take the floor? Tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you became a health coach and started your own business.
Yeah, so welcome to my extensive decorated resume, listeners, and also Demi. I've actually done a lot of things in my lifetime, but just prior to starting my own business, I was working as a gym manager. So I was still aligned with what I was doing there. But in terms of having other different professions and what I've done, I've always followed what ignited my soul at the time. And I've had a different variety of jobs since I was around 13 and a half. Starting at a cafe manager and working in Macca's, moving up to a bar supervisor. Then when in my early 20s, moved as a police officer, assistant gym manager. And in between all of those sort of things, I did little part-time casual jobs on the side. So like radio host and promo assistant, brand ambassador.
That's so cool.
So many different things. And then I moved into a sales role, which I stayed in that for a few years. And that was in food and beverage before I landed the gym job. And then I moved into gym, online coaching for other coaches, and then opening my own business as well. So I've done a lot of different things, and it is quite, I suppose you might be listening and going like, how did you manage to do like so many different things, and also why? And that's another reason why we're going to be discussing that today, is because through everything that we've done in our lives, obviously it's got us to where we are today, but it's also taught us very valuable lessons along the way about what we like, what we don't like, what really makes us feel really happy, what really aligns with who we want to be in this world. And I feel like the best way to be able to do that is actually trialing out things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and then going from there. And then, you're able to make decisions that, are based on what is best for you and also people around you, to ensure that we get the best result as well. So in terms of that as well, I'd love to know around your job history as well, Demi. Tell us a little bit about yours.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that though. That's really cool. I definitely noticed that theme there, where you've always sort of been part of the health and fitness space, or sort of always gravitated towards it. And while you were talking about it, I just thought it was actually really interesting isn't it funny how we sort of, there's this internal knowing of what type of direction that you're potentially going to take, and how to obviously you've followed that to some degree. There might have been times where you sort of veered off on like little different tangents throughout your life with different jobs that might have been in different industries. But like you said, it is so important to just try different things. And I suppose what came to mind when you were talking about that as well is just the other day, someone asked me if I'm nervous to turn 30, because I'm 30 at the end of the year. Oh my goodness. And I was actually a little bit like, it feels weird to me saying like I'm 30. It's just, I think that's something that's new for like anyone that's coming up to 30, I think that that's a bit of a weird thing to have to say for a little while. But they asked me, they're like, oh, really? Are you nearly 30? Are you nervous to turn 30? And I was like, no, not really. Like, I've done a lot of stuff and I've tried a lot of things. And so I just feel pretty confident and comfortable with where I'm at. Like, don't get me wrong, there's still a world of growth that I want to go through. But, you know, I've done so many different things. I think I spent and I've chatted about this with my partner as well. Like, I think I spent my 20s the right way, trying lots of different things and figuring out what it is that I liked and didn't like. But to give you a little bit of specific history about how I came to the fitness industry, I definitely got into personal training for selfish reasons. I wanted to look better myself. I wanted to feel better. I wanted to get stronger and all those things. And that naturally, by progression, led me to doing my personal training certificates. But prior to that, I was traveling a lot, backpacking. I was doing tour guide jobs. I used to walk the camels on the beach as a tour guide in Broome, Western Australia, if you know where that is, because I know some of the listeners are from the eastern states. But I used to walk camels, and I did that for like nearly a year, and that was a great job. Walking like 30 Ks a day in 40-degree heat. It's fun. And then that led me to going over to Whitsunday Islands, working in hospitality on some of the islands over there. Then I went back to Broome, then came back down to Perth, started working as a tours operator for a place called the Lobster Shack. So that's an international lobster import and export, and we had a restaurant there. So I did hospitality, working with people all the time and often traveling. So often being able to like pick up my bags and or pack my stuff into the car and move to a different town. I've just always been like that. This is probably the most stable I've ever been in my life. And then after that, I went fly in, fly out. So I started washing pots, flying up to mine sites, working in the kitchens. And that's when I really stepped into the gym for the first time properly in my life. And I would have been like 22, 23. So if you think about how early that people are getting into health and fitness and training and stuff these days, I was pretty late to the party, but back then I don't really think I was. And then after that, I did that for about 9 months, but I was going through all like the typical health and fitness stuff that you do when you're first learning. I was, doing cardio twice a day. I was trying to train weights. I was doing all the things. And then that just led me to wanting to do my personal training certificate. So I'd actually saved up enough money to pay for my course up front and then stop work for 3 months while I studied, which was good because the mines paid me good money to wash pots, considering. And then I moved back down to Perth, did my certificates, and then got a job on a cruise ship and worked overseas for 10 months. I did a 10-month contract sailing through the Eastern and Western Caribbean and Bahamas and Bermuda, which was really cool. And then came back to Perth and compete, and then started online coaching since then. And that's led me to where I am now, I think 3 or 4 years later. So that's my extensive job history. Some of it is like completely left of field, but every little piece of it has really helped me get to where I am today, I guess, all these little elements. I think it's really important to reflect on those things too. Like, how do you feel with your previous employment? Like, if you could have one as probably the most influential to where you are now, what do you think yours would be?
It's actually, to be in all honesty, it's actually quite hard to pinpoint exactly which one, because each profession that I've had, I can honestly take massive key takeaways from each one about learning experiences from even the people that I've interacted with, the people that I really want to be around, in terms of hierarchy, like what to do and what not to do, in terms of like what tends to be successful and how to treat people. Every single thing has taught me resilience, and strength, but also I think like what you could potentially agree with, Demi, is that, you know, whilst we've had extensive job histories in trialing out things and whatnot as well, it's also taught us courage to step into the unknown. And I think that is also a good learning lesson in that aspect. Like I remember the first time I quit my first job, I was like, I'm never going to be able to get another job. And I got another job, and then I was like, okay, I can do it. And then I was like, okay, sweet. Okay. And then slowly but surely, the more that not that I'm saying changing jobs every 5 seconds, but, you know, when you want to chase something that feels really good for you, it allows you to have those skills to be able to go, cool, I want to do that thing, and I want to believe in myself to do that. And I love what you've done throughout your 20s. Bring on the 30s. What else is about? That's so cool.
Yeah. And like, I think as well, like, it's probably the biggest thing is I always tried to follow fun. Not too much commitment. Like, I think looking back, you know, if I was to potentially change anything, it would have been like stick at things a little longer, because I would definitely just sort of like, oh, I don't like this, up, change, like, oh, this isn't fun anymore. Or like, even to a degree, there was a point where it was like, oh, this is too hard, I'm going to do something else. So I think that for me, coming into the health and fitness space, I have had to deal with a lot of those things where I'm like, oh, this is pretty hard. And then noticing my natural defense mechanism to up and move rather than stick it out. So I'm glad I did have that, though, because obviously it was a survival sort of way of navigating my life, where I'm like, I don't like this anymore, this is getting hard, I'm going to move. And I always followed what was fun, and I never really did anything too long that I didn't really like doing, which is good, because it has brought about all these different things that I can now integrate into my career. Like being a tour guide, that was like, I was never really shy of public speaking, but it did give me my first sort of professional experience with speaking in front of large groups of people. 30 to 40 people a day. I'd be talking to them about, you know, what we were doing that day, or the history of the area and stuff like that. And that's always been something that I've been able to carry out throughout every single career or every single job. And now it's benefits me in the way where I can talk on a podcast, or I can film a YouTube video, or I can get on a group call with my clients and be pretty confident and comfortable. So, you know, every single little piece of the puzzle has meant something. And like you said, I think you said it in a really sort of tactical way, where you said, like, learning about how to treat people in terms of hierarchy. Like, I probably would have just said, yeah, I worked for some really shit people and they treated me really bad. And I learned that I didn't really want to be that person as a boss. So I love the way that you put it too, because instantly the way that you said it, I was like, yeah, I felt that. I know what you're talking about. So even when you feel like the experience might be negative, you can still draw something positive from it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, always. You know, learning experiences, every single thing that we can, like, I suppose, interact with and go through, we can draw something from it, and it's all a learning experience. And, you know, it's like you were just saying too, around like that survival instinct. That was something that I've had to learn as well, is like, okay, you know, slow down, steady enough, stay with something for a little while, find actually what's working and what's not. But I was a little bit opposite to you, just ever so slightly at the start. I originally went for careers, and, you know, some people might be relatable to this, but I originally went for careers for safety and also job, like money security, coming from a background of like very low income in terms of that.
I had none of that.
Oh, it was like, oh, I wanted to get like a career that I was like, okay, this is the thing. Like, that's probably why you might listen and go, oh, she's had like random things here and there. Because it's like, follow my passion, which is very scary, or do the thing that has that job security and will give you that salary every single thing. And like, that's like stepping into that fear and knowing that you have to be the hustler to make the things work on your own. That's definitely a valuable learning experience as well. And it truly shows resilience.
And 100% it does. And it also shows a little bit of you coming to a place where you can identify that following your passion could actually end up being more lucrative than getting that salary that you know, someone places a value on what your work is worth versus you creating what your worth is worth in terms of monetary value. So it's quite cool. What do you think, when is there anything specific that happened that helped you really get there with your sort of ability to move away from that? Because like I never had that. Like I never even really became financially literate until I was like 25 or 26. Like I didn't care about money. I remember moving to Broome, Western Australia, before I got my job with $200 in my bank account, and I had nothing. I booked into the backpackers for a week of accommodation, and that I had $50 left, and so I bought 2 beers for $4 at the bar, and I was like fuck it, YOLO. That was me up until I was like 25, and I had no money. So, and I also I come from a background of like, my parents went bankrupt when I was like, I think 7 or 8. Like we had no money growing up. So I didn't have that. So do you think that there's any one particular thing that potentially helped you go from, you know, being a little bit, you know, obviously deterred from, following your passion and wanting to get that salary and have that job security? Do you think there was anything that sort of helped you shift?
There was one, like I just wanted to say, I love that share. I definitely had a similar experience in my early 20s. I mean, look, like you're always like, oh, well, what's the saying back then? YOLO or whatever. Literally live by that.
I got $50, I can afford beer.
I'm fine. No, I feel like the main point, I think there was a point in my life, and I won't say which job and whatever it was, but I got to a point where I ended up being homeless, and I couch surfed for 6 months, and I was still working a job that was busting my ass every single day. And I was like, if this is what it's like, I don't want this to be like that. If I can struggle and survive at this point, I'm like, I'm just going to have to try and do what I feel is really good for me. And I, as bad as it sounds, it probably took me to get to rock bottom, and also stubbornness, because I definitely could have moved home like 5 hours. But I was like, no, I don't want to be that. I want to keep going. I think that was probably the point where I was like, you know, if I can survive with what I'm doing now, I wasn't thriving, I was definitely surviving. But if I can do this now and I'm still okay, I'm like, I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and go as hard as I can, because like that was a really hard point in my life. And I was like, no, I'm going to follow my passion, right? It's going to take, like, I don't care how long it takes me to get there, but I'm going to keep working hard. And I think that was like my sort of point where I was like, okay, cool. All right. This is kind of it. Like I had my cry, you know, don't get me wrong. But then I was like, okay, get your ass up. Let's go.
Yeah. Stiffen up the upper lip. Wow. That's so, I mean, it just again shows another example of resilience for you. And I think if there's a key takeaway for the listeners in that, it would be, you know, understand that you could end up working really hard to build someone else's business, or you could end up working really hard at something that you don't actually enjoy that much. And this is a lesson that I learned, was like, I had the ability to work really hard. Like work ethic has never been my downfall. But I had the ability to work really hard and do something that I didn't 100% enjoy every day. So I was like, imagine what I could do if I loved what I was doing every day. And that was the thought that kept resonating with me every time I came up against that. And again, later on in my sort of career, when I'd already pushed into like the health and fitness space, and I was back in Australia and I was working online, I was like, I'm working really hard in a space like health and fitness that I love, but what I'm doing day to day, I don't really love it. But imagine what I could do if I loved what I was doing. And so then I've slowly started to build that position where I can make sure that everything I do in my day is what I love. But it's, you know, that's such a pivotal sort of message to take from this, is like, you can, you can work super, super hard at something you don't love, or potentially for someone else. And imagine what you could do if you were just doing what you actually love and fully aligned with. And if there was any other reason to take the risk, then let that be it, right?
Yep. Absolutely. And yeah, definitely stepping into that, which is really, really important. So really good share on that, Demi. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And it just that age-old saying that you don't grow from your comfort zone, I guess.
No, which leads us to our second point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So growth happens outside of the comfort zone, which I'm sure all of our listeners have definitely heard of that. And whilst this is true, I like to contest it ever so slightly. And the only reason I say this is because I don't know about yourself, Demi, but I've definitely lived a life where everything in my life was super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm like, where's the growth? I mean, there's definitely growth, don't get me wrong. There's growth to learn that you need to have some comfort in your life to be able to
Yeah.
step outside of your comfort zone. So, you know,
Right.
to our listeners out there, I suppose, you know, always have like, safety is going to look different to every single person. But when you're on the quest to, you know, I suppose creating that lifestyle, what feels really good for you, and following your passions in terms of following the jobs and stuff like that, it's good to have a little bit of safety around you, I suppose, in terms of friends, you know, safe home, whatever it might be. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Demi?
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, this is going to look very different for everyone. I definitely don't recommend anyone just packs up their stuff and goes to a different town with $200 in their bank account. But, you know, if that's what you got to do to learn your lesson. But at the same time, like there was a small amount of safety net there where I knew I could always come home. Like, so whatever that might be for you, like I don't necessarily, it's a hard one because some people say like, oh, don't have a plan B, because then, you know, the most successful people never had a plan B. It was their only option. I think that that could potentially be quite detrimental to a lot of people, not having a plan B, because at the same time, you never know, that plan B might end up being something that is really valuable to you. I would say don't have a plan B in the sense of like, oh, if I fail, I'm just going to go back to, you know, my office job. Have a plan B in the sense of like, okay, if this idea doesn't work, what can I do to help me continue progressing in a general direction? Because at the same time, you might go for an idea or something that you think is really passionate about it, but the concept doesn't land and it's not successful out in the real world. And that's okay. That just means you have to go back to your drawing board and figure out what it is. Or, you know, the concept might land, but you might realize that you don't actually enjoy that thing. And so I think it is really important to still have those other options that can be progressing you still towards a future that you would love. Like, say, for example, you know, if I wasn't successful in building an online coaching business, my plan B was to go back FIFO. And not that FIFO was my future, but it's good money and it's easy and it's something where I can build more capital to then put into something else that I want to do. And that's always been an option for me. I don't need it, thankfully, because I wouldn't have enjoyed it, but it is still something that I would have done to help me get from point A to point B. So it would have, both options were going to take me outside my comfort zone. Like I never liked going back to FIFO. It was, like I said, good money, but I didn't like the work that I had to do to get that money. So again, I'm outside my comfort zone in the later stages of my FIFO career. Even being a personal trainer, I would go up to the mine sites to do my 2-week swing, and I would actually have to have talks with myself about how I was going to get myself through the 2 weeks in a positive frame of mind, rather than just like slogging it out and hating my life. So again, another thing that's outside your comfort zone, and it was an opportunity for me to grow every single time I had to do that. But like, so like you're saying, Kirsty, to bring that back around to the safety topic, I would say, again, safety can look different for everyone. Plan Bs can be a sense of safety for people that like to be organized or like to just make sure that they're mitigating any small amount of risk. It might be, you know, finding someone that you can learn from. Like I've always admired you, Kirsty, for the people that you've been able to rub shoulders with in the fitness industry. You've had some amazing mentors. And I think that that's something that can be that can be safety for people. Like if there's someone in your professional environment that you can kind of get closer to and rub shoulders with and learn what they do, that might be a sense of safety. It could be, you know, really helping your family and your friends understand what it is that you're actually doing or trying to achieve. And something that probably is actually probably more about addressing the fear, but you know, being really open and honest with the people around you about what you are trying to achieve. I do remember that there was times in my life where I was too scared to even tell people I wanted to be a personal trainer, because I was scared of like the judgment that I might have you know, or they'd be like, oh, that's so vain, you just want to look good. And, you know, people used to also, I used to hear people bagging out like social media and people promoting their business on social media. They'd be like, oh, just for the gram, just for the likes and stuff like that. And I was always too scared to post and to be that person that like put a picture up of myself, because people would be like, oh, it's just for the likes. And then I learned later on in my business, no, that's actually really important for building a business, is being able to market yourself online. It's free marketing. And I had to really, like, even in when Aaron and I were in a new relationship, I had to explain to him, this is actually how I build my business. So it's going to be an important part of my life. So yeah, there's like lots of things that are going to come from you stepping outside of your comfort zone and growing. But then all those little challenges that I had along the way, and whoever's listening to this, you will experience them. But figuring out how to create safety, a big one for me was being able to express to my friends and my family what I was really trying to do.
That's a really important share around that. Like you said, safety is going to look different to everyone. And, you know, out of those things, you know, having that one was job security in terms of being able to step out of that. But then the other one was as well is letting your friends and family know where you're at, because that, you know, one, I suppose, soothes the inner critic that we have in terms of like what we got to do, because, you know, it's right. I definitely grew up with that, where everyone's like, you post on, you know, social media and they're like, oh, you're like an influencer. And you're like,
yeah,
well,
like it's a bad thing. Influencers
yeah, like
that look like they're having a great time.
You can be a positive influence in this world. I think it's lovely. It depends how you look at it
100%.
and perspective. So that's
the
definitely
goal.
really good. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a really good share. And, you know, I just want to touch on that as well, like having that level of safety with the job. I think that's a really good point, is that, you know, don't put your dreams on hold if you're working something that doesn't feel okay right now. You know, look at doing little things that still align, like what you mentioned before, Demi.
Yeah.
You know, what other little things that can you do throughout your day while still doing something that maybe doesn't feel okay to you right now, but aligns with where you want to be? Like, don't think you have to quit it all straight away and then whatever. I mean, that's up to you. Actually, you can do whatever you feel. But at the same time, if you want to, and you're like, you know, oh, okay, like I'm not in the position to, you know, change that right now, you know, where can you start? You know, are you studying as well as working, you know, doing things like that, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners are doing, managing, you know, studying as well as working, or depending on what you're kind of doing as well. So like you said, safety is going to look different to every single person, which is really important, but you've got to step outside that comfort zone to be able to grow. So have a nice, I suppose, balance of both to some degree. And try not to make your life completely uncomfortable all the time, because that can be really hard.
Yeah, because that's going to feel like you're pushing shit uphill a little bit. But I guess another really important thing to share as well with people that are listening is, you know, identifying what is actually a physical limitation, like, you know, the fact that you need to pay your bills and you need to be actually earning a certain amount of money. And yeah, maybe you can't afford to just quit your job and go and start that thing that you're passionate about. But what's actually a physical limitation versus what's just made up fear in your head, right? Like, is that I would start to do a little bit of self-investigation. If you're someone listening to this that really wants to like start that thing that you've been wanting to do and you've been potentially too scared, you know, there's always a reason why now's not a good time. Start to do some self-investigation around what are actually physical limitations that I have and what is just a perceived limitation due to some fear. And then that way you can start actually addressing the things that need to be, like, you know, they're non-negotiables, they can't change. Like, there are people out there, you know, single parents with kids and, you know, potentially wanting to start, you know, something that you're passionate about to build a better life. It's not like you can just go and, you know, quit your job and you know, move to another town or something, or to chase that job. There's actual physical limitations there. But what will potentially get in the way of what people really want to do is, there might be that physical limitation, but then the rest of it is fear. So they don't start the small little things that they could do to edge them in the right direction. If you can't do, like, just because you might not be able to go for the whole thing right now, what small actionable steps can you put in place between now and when you're in a better position to go after that thing that you want? Like, I think as well that really speaks to the fear side of things too, because if you have fear around progressing or moving into a new space, or you have sort of limiting beliefs and doubts, you kind of want to look at how can you break that down? How can you break it down into small, more achievable, actionable daily steps that, again, move you closer to your goal, but keeping that element of safety as well.
Absolutely. That's the thing as well. That's the common key that most people, might overlook. I know I definitely did when I was younger, is actually breaking it down into small actionable steps, because when we've got this big goal that's in front of us, what we want to achieve, it can be like really daunting, right? And you're like, fuck, it's too hard. It's too hard to step into, like it's too hard to do.
Yeah.
So, like Demi was just discussing, it's like, break it down into smaller actionable steps. And, the idea of what you could potentially do this, if you're listening in, is like, what's your big goal, right? If you were to break it down into 5 actionable steps, right? Making it the easiest thing possible. And the idea is that you want to make it as simple as possible, so it makes it pretty much effortless to start. And the idea behind that is that, naturally, I don't know, it's probably the culture that we live in this world where it's like, unless you're going 100%, there's no point doing it at all. But
yeah,
in that small action, right? Over time, it accumulates into bigger actions towards where you want to be. So, for example, how you could look at that, it might be, for example, getting into the fitness industry, you want to become a coach, where do you start? I feel like the first step is actually contacting the, it could be potentially, contacting a study provider in terms of like what their study packages might be. It might be that's the first step, or it might be like, looking at your calendar, or maybe even just setting up your calendar if you don't have a calendar. Like, it depends on the individual, but you want to try and make it as small as possible just to get that foot over that line where it's like, okay, cool. All right, awesome. All right, I'm going to chill here for a bit and then I'm going to try again. What's the next step? So
a little bit of that fear dissipates every time. And if you take, potentially smaller steps, and I think as well, something that might also prevent people from moving into something that they potentially might enjoy doing is that sort of comparison syndrome, where they might compare like their chapter 30 to someone else's chapter 300. And we are very conditioned for that in society, is like, if you're not there already, then there's like, you got to start somewhere. In any different industry, you have to start somewhere, whether that's maybe there's people listening to this that want to start their own beauty business or something like that. Like, you're not going to walk out the door and start your business and be like the best eyebrow technician or the best lash technician, and you're not going to start in the fitness industry and be the best personal trainer or make the most money. But every single industry has that sort of you have that journey that you have to go through with every single industry. So another thing that I've always reminded myself of when it comes to fear is not necessarily comparing myself to others, but looking at other people in positions that I potentially might want to be in and saying, well, if they can do it, fucking so can I. Like, I can 100% do that. Like, the only thing that's going to stop me from doing that is my mind telling me that I can't for whatever reason. So it's really important to really get a handle on your mental resilience or your ability to question your self-doubt. Because if you let your self-doubt kind of just like take the reins, then you'll never get to where you want to go. You'll never get over that fear. You won't even be able to, like, this is people that struggle with severe anxiety. It's a fear of, I shouldn't say the word just there, but it is a very real feeling of fear that something bad is inevitably going to happen. So I see that as people have had their self-doubt reins taken and steered in a direction where they now can't really capitalize on even the smallest amount of things. So you have to really put effort into creating that mental resilience in that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really important thing, is that, over time as well, that mental resilience will take time to build. And, it's the same thing again as starting small and, I suppose facing some of those limiting beliefs, like you said before, what's physical and what's your internal limiting belief, like, what's an actual limitation in terms of that. So in terms of being able to build that mental resilience, that too can also come down to what you're sort of doing and how you're sort of pushing yourself as well. Because if you go too hard, that can be also kind of challenging as well. But, we want to step into that fear, and we want to be able to, ensure that we break it down into those smaller actionable steps. So that's the key takeaway from this one as well. And to ensure that, at the end of the day, you're also still following something that you love as well. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, really good topics for today. Anything else you want to add, Demi?
No, I think this has been a really, really good chat, and hopefully the listeners are able to draw some inspiration or, some kind of, some thought-provoking sort of topics where hopefully if you're listening to this, you're able to sit and go, what have I potentially been sort of stopping myself from being able to do for, potentially a perceived fear or a perceived limitation, and how can I move in the right direction towards my goal? Or, I guess that just kind of, I think it's a really good place to wrap it up with being able to, like a really big thing that I've recently been starting to adapt as a thought process is like, I don't want to wonder what if at any point in my life, right? That doesn't mean I can take every single opportunity, but I am starting to move into even more spaces that I'm uncomfortable in, because I don't want to be wondering what if I get to 40 or 50 or on my deathbed. Like, I'm pretty much at this point in my life making sure that I am doing all those things that I need to do to really feel, to me, the idea of success and being successful at what I love doing is to not really necessarily wonder what if, and yeah, like that's pretty much what I'm building now. So that was a big pivotal moment for me, was to understand that, my time here is limited, is inevitably limited. And what type of impact do I want to have on the world? And does that mean I'm going to have to get out of my comfort zone? Absolutely. Does it mean it's going to be scary? Absolutely. It's going to be hard work, but it's putting me in the best position to feel like I've made a true impact on the world, and also honored myself in being the type of person I know I can be and the type of professional I know I can be. So that to me all comes down to, I don't want to have to wonder what if at the end of the day. What if I took that opportunity, or what if I wasn't so scared to do that, or, or I could have done this. I don't want those thoughts. I just want to be making sure I'm really honoring myself in that respect. So hopefully that's something that resonates with a couple of listeners as well.
Absolutely. I know that definitely aligns with me as well in terms of that. I never live a life of what ifs in terms of that, but choosing which what if I go for.
Yeah.
But in terms of that, yeah, absolutely. Because it's like, as life goes on, in this lifetime, it's sort of like, I want to be able to do all the beautiful things that I possibly can to help all the people as well. So just like you said, Demi, and I love that so much. And I suppose in summary as well, in terms of other things that we'd love for you to take away for today, is another one as well, is that it's okay to sort of seek support on your journey as well. So as we'll touch on before, is recruiting mentors that are aligned with you to learn about your passions, like what works and what doesn't, so you can learn, about things that, what really work for you in terms of alignment, what would you do differently, or what do you really enjoy, and what would you like to carry on and, spread the message out to the world as well. And I suppose leading on to that last, to another one as well, is how do you know if you found the right thing? So Demi and I were discussing this before, and it's important. It's like, how do you actually know if you're in the right profession, right? I feel, we'll both have, I suppose, individual perspectives on this touch, but as a summary, I suppose you would know in, I suppose, your heart of hearts, does it help you get up to, like, every single day? Do you feel excited to wake up in the mornings? There's definitely going to be hard days, but at the same time, it's like, what really excites you? What really brings you joy? Like, is it bringing you things that, make your brain tick and make it work, and, make your eyes light up and get to be able to connect with really cool people, if that's your sort of thing as well? And, that's sort of like, for myself, I was like, well, I get to be able to feel good. I get to help people. I'm doing things that make, help people feel really amazing in their own skin and their own lives. I get to connect with really awesome people like yourself, Demi. Like, I feel like it's all in alignment for me. So I suppose for yourself, how would you describe it if you feel like you found the right profession in your life?
So I think for me, a big thing was definitely understanding that this will always be a moving target for me. Like I will always be pursuing something that I know at that point in time is going to, make me feel really good and fulfilled with my role. But that's always going to be a moving target. So I'm always going to have something else that's going to come up that's also going to, drive me to move forward in whatever direction, and there's always going to be new challenges, but I think that is something that feels right for me in itself. Do you know what I mean? Like we were talking a little bit before about making sure that whatever sort of sacrifices you have to make to get to where you want to go, or whatever hardships and challenges you come up against, some people are just more prepared to sacrifice and work hard because the trade-off is greater for them in whatever industry. So you have to make sure that whatever you're sacrificing, the trade-off is something that's really valuable to you. And like you said, you'll know in your heart of hearts if you're chasing the right thing. But yeah, for me, I guess coming into the fitness industry, that was something that I definitely knew I wanted at the time. And then, where I am now and how I've grown to the position that I'm currently in, I know that I will continue to grow. My position's going to change, and then that's going to lead me into something else. And I don't necessarily know exactly what that looks like yet, but, potentially starting this podcast is something that is going to be a part of that. And, all these beautiful things. I know that I started out as a coach in the health and fitness industry, and I know that that's probably not what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. But again, the whole point of this podcast is every single piece of the puzzle is going to move me in that direction. So for me, it's a moving target, but I'm happy with the pieces of the puzzle that are moving. Does that make sense?
Perfect. I love that. Beautiful summary.
Yeah.
It was a really good summary. I love that. And that was actually brilliant. I love it so much. It's so good. Oh, that is so nice. And I suppose even just touching on with us starting this podcast as well, we stepped into a little bit outside of our comfort zone to create this. So, we're also taking you on the journey of us stepping outside of our comfort zones, to show you guys what is capable as well, if you just trust yourself just enough and connect with some really cool people too. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening into Creating Connection in Health and Wellness with myself, Kirsty, and the beautiful Demi. If you liked our episode or are loving our podcast as well, so check it out on Spotify and YouTube. Please leave us a review, take a screenshot of this episode and share it to your socials. You can tag us. Mine's at kirsti.jones and also at demiroseallaway, which we'll put in our description below anyways. Every reshare counts and we deeply appreciate it, and all feedback is always welcome. But we hope you have a beautiful day when you are listening in, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.